It came to pass on the night before the great battle that Saul, the king of Israel, withdrew himself from the noise of the camp and stood alone upon a lonely hill, while the cold wind moved across the dark land and awaited the coming war rested heavily upon his troubled heart. When he lifted his eyes, he beheld the vast camp of the Philistines spread across the valley below, and their countless fires burned through the night like stars scattered upon the earth, a fearful sign of the power gathered against Israel. Yet the multitude of the enemy did not trouble the king as greatly as the silence that hung over the heavens above him. For though armies threatened his kingdom, the absence of God's voice filled him with a deeper and more dreadful fear. But the Lord, who once guided him in battle and gave him victory over his enemies, had not answered him in the hour of his greatest need, and Saul felt the terrible weight of that silence pressing upon his soul. Neither by dreams in the night, nor by the voices of prophets, nor by the sacred lots that the priests once used to discern the will of God had any answer come, and the king stood in darkness, without counsel or direction. Now Samuel the prophet, the faithful servant of the Lord who had once guided Israel and anointed Saul to be king, had died, and all the people of Israel had mourned greatly for him, for they knew that a mighty voice of wisdom had been taken from among them. They had laid his body to rest in Ramah, the city of his fathers, and there the prophet who had spoken the word of the Lord throughout his life was buried, leaving behind a nation that suddenly felt the loss of his guiding voice. In those earlier days of his reign, Saul had removed from the land those who practiced homilia spirits, sorcery, and the calling of the dead, driving them away from Israel so that the people might remain faithful to the law of their God. For the law of the Lord had clearly forbidden such practices among his people, declaring that those who sought knowledge from the spirits of the dead had turned away from the living God who alone gives wisdom and truth. Saul himself had commanded this decree with great zeal, sending his soldiers throughout the land to purge Israel of these forbidden practices, so that the nation might remain holy before the Lord. But in those days the Philistines gathered themselves together with great strength, assembling their armies from many cities and preparing once more to rise against Israel in war. They came and pitched their camp at Shunem, filling the valley with soldiers, chariots, and weapons of war, until their presence spread like a dark shadow across the land. When word of this reached Saul, he called together all the fighting men of Israel, summoning them from every tribe so that they might stand together and defend their land. The armies of Israel came and pitched their camp upon Mount Gilboa, setting their tents upon the hills while they watched the enemy gathering in the valley below. When Saul looked out and beheld the vast army of the Philistines, with their banners rising and their warriors countless as the sand, his heart trembled greatly within him, and fear began to take hold of his spirit. Therefore, in his distress, Saul turned to seek the counsel of the Lord, hoping that the God who had once chosen him might yet speak again and guide him in the coming battle. But though the king prayed and waited in the silence of the night, the Lord answered him not, and no voice came from heaven to give him comfort or direction. No dream came to him in the night to reveal the will of God, and the darkness passed without vision or message. Neither did any prophet arise among the people to speak the word of the Lord to the troubled king. Even the sacred lots used by the priests to discern God's judgment gave no answer, and the king found himself surrounded by silence on every side. As the night grew deeper, Saul's heart grew faint within him, for he feared that the God who once guided him had now turned away from him forever. Then, in the darkness of his fear, Saul spoke secretly to his servants who stood near him and said, "Seek me a woman who hath a familiar spirit, that I may go unto her and inquire of her." For the king, who once trusted the voice of God, now turned his thoughts toward a forbidden path, hoping to find guidance from a source that the law of the Lord had condemned. His servants answered him quietly and said, "Behold, there is a woman that hath a familiar spirit who dwelleth in the village of Endor." Then Saul disguised himself and put on other garments, covering his royal appearance so that none might recognize the king of Israel as he set out upon this secret and dangerous journey. He departed by night, and 2 men went with him as companions, and together they walked through the dark wilderness toward the village where the woman lived. When they came to the woman by night, they approached her dwelling quietly, for Saul desired that none should know of the path he had chosen. Saul said unto the woman, "I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring me up whomsoever I shall name unto thee. For the king sought to call forth the spirit of one who had long since departed from the living world, helping to receive counsel from beyond the grave. But when the woman heard these words, she feared greatly because of the king's decree, for she knew that Saul had driven such people from the land, and she trembled at the danger that stood before her. The woman looked upon him with troubled eyes, and said, Behold, thou knowest what Saul hath done, how he hath cut off those that have familiar spirits out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life, to cause me to die? For she spoke out of fear, not knowing that the man who stood before her in disguise was the very king whose decree she dreaded, and her voice trembled as she guarded her life. Then Saul sware unto her by the Lord, saying, As the Lord liveth, there shall no punishment happen to thee for this thing. And by that oath he bound himself, invoking the very name of the Lord whose voice he had not heard, yet seeking to gain what he desired through a forbidden path. Then said the woman, Whom shall I bring up unto thee? And she looked upon him carefully, waiting for his answer. He said, Bring me up Samuel. At that name a heavy stillness filled the place, for the prophet had long been dead, and yet the king desired to hear from him once more. The woman began to perform her secret art, though her heart was filled with unease, for this request was unlike any she had known before. But as she called upon the unseen realm, something occurred that caused her spirit to tremble within her. And the woman cried out with a loud voice, startled and afraid at what she beheld before her eyes. For she perceived that the matter was no ordinary deception, but something beyond her control, and fear seized her completely. She turned and said unto Saul, Why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. Then the king said unto her, Be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And his voice pressed urgently for an answer. The woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said unto her, What form is he of? She said, An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground, and bowed himself. The spirit of Samuel spoke, and his voice was solemn and filled with authority, saying, Why hast thou disquieted me, to bring me up? Saul answered, saying, I am sore distressed. For the Philistines make war against me, and God is departed from me, and enswears me no more, neither by prophets, nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. Then said Samuel, Wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord is departed from thee, and is become thine enemy? The words of the prophet fell heavy upon Saul, for they confirmed the fear that had already taken root in his heart. And Samuel continued, saying, The Lord hath done to thee, as he spake by me. For the Lord hath rent the kingdom out of thine hand, and given it to thy neighbor, even to David. Because thou obeyedst not the voice of the Lord, nor executedst his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore hath the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. Moreover the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. The Lord also shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Then Saul fell straightway all along on the earth, and was sore afraid because of the words of Samuel. There was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all the day, nor all the night. The woman came unto Saul, and saw that he was sore troubled, and she said unto him, Behold, thine handmaid hath obeyed thy voice. Now therefore, I pray thee, hearken not also unto the voice of thine handmaid, and let me set a morsel of bread before thee. Now eat, that thou mayest have strength when thou goest on thy way. But he refused, and said, I will not eat. Yet his servants, together with the woman, compelled him, and he hearkened unto their voice. So he arose from his seat, and sat upon the bed. The woman had a fat calf in the house, and she hated, and killed it. She took flour, kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread thereof. She brought it before Saul and his servants. They ate. Then they rose up, and went away that night. Saul arose from the dwelling of the woman, and the first light of dawn had not yet broken, and the darkness still clung to the earth as a shroud. He went unto his camp, The weight of the words of Samuel lay heavily upon his heart, and his spirit was troubled exceedingly. The men of Israel beheld their king, saw that he was so afraid, and none could speak comfort unto him. Saul knew that the battle was at hand, that the hand of the Lord was against him, even as the prophet had spoken. Saul encouraged the men to gird themselves, to take up their swords, their shields, their spears to prepare for the coming battle. The Philistines advanced. The host of Israel met them upon the slopes of Mount Gilboa. The battle was sore, there was much slaughter on both sides, and the cry of men and the clash of weapons filled the valley.
But the Lord had departed from Saul, and the spirit of victory was no longer with him.
The Philistines pressed hard upon him, and his sons, who went with him into the battle, were smitten one by one. Saul's heart was sorely grieved. He saw that the battle was lost, and that Israel was delivered into the hands of their enemies. Saul said unto his armor-bearer, Draw thy sword, and thrust me through, lest these uncircumcised come and mock me.
But his armor-bearer feared greatly, and would not stretch forth his hand, for he was sore afraid. Then Saul took his own sword, and fell upon it, and the king of Israel died that day together with his sons.
When the men of Israel that were on the other side of the valley saw that the host fled, they also fled. The Philistines prevailed. The Philistines came and occupied the camp. There they found the bodies of Saul and his sons upon Mount Gilboa. They took the body of Saul, stripped him of his armor, sent his head into the land of the Philistines, and fastened his armor in their temple.
But the people of Jabesh-Gilead arose, and by night took the bodies, and buried them under a tree, and they mourned for Saul 7 days. Thus was fulfilled the word of the prophet Samuel, and the judgment of the Lord came upon Saul and his house, as had been declared.
The kingdom passed from Saul, and the Lord raised up David, a man after his own heart, to lead Israel in righteousness. This story stands as a solemn warning unto all, that the voice of the Lord must be hearkened unto with reverence, for the paths of fear and forbiddance counsel lead only unto ruin and destruction.
Even a king may fall when he forsaketh the Lord, and even the mightiest of warriors may be cast down when they seek counsel from darkness instead of from the living God. Let the tale of Saul endure as a testament, that obedience and reverence unto the Lord bring life, while rebellion and fear bring ruin unto the soul. Thus endeth the story of Saul, and the lessons of fear, disobedience, and the consequences of turning from the Lord remain for all generations.